Action!
Okay, so hi, I'm Jackson. Most of you might know me. I occasionally dive, and professionally I'm a cell molecular biologist. I'm here to talk about decompression physiology and algorithms. I'm going to hand wave over most of the math in the algorithms because I hate math. Also, I can't do it justice and explain it the way that would be best. So, to start, quick question. Has anyone been bent? Okay, second question. Does anyone do decompression dives? Wrong. How many of you have dove below 30-ish feet? Everyone?
Yeah,
Congratulations, you've all done a deco dive, technically. Which is something we don't often think about. In a cell, what does decompression look like? Other than just you have gas that's dissolved going to a gaseous state.
Does it increase the volume?
A lot,
Yeah.
yes. As someone who does science, I like experiments. So, before we start, this is your cell. I sound like Ronald Reagan, this is your brain, this is your drugs.
That was exactly what I thought.
And as we add pressure to it, like we're descending, let's see if this actually works. If we're descending and we add pressure, you don't want to rapidly come to the surface, but yeah. So if we rapidly get to the surface, the gas will go be a gas again because you're losing partial pressure. Well, there's a greater difference in partial pressure, so you're changing phases. But yeah, that's what the cell looks like on deco. Okay, so anywho, decompression physiology. So we're going to cover decompression theory, decompression physiology. Two of the kinds of DCS, so gas and blood, which is where you get gas bubble in blood or in a liquid that's not supposed to be, and in situ bubbles, which is more similar to what that demonstration was, which is gas forming in tissues or microbubbles forming in tissues. Two of the kinds of models of decompression, so deterministic models and probabilistic models, and then a little bit on model validation, so actually testing different models. So, decompression is the theory and study and modeling of the transfer of inert gases during changes of ambient pressure. So when we go down, we increase the ambient pressure on our cells, and when we come back up, ambient pressure decreases. However, that gas that's now driven into solution, the cell needs to go someplace, and we need to predict how it moves. Decompression modeling attempts to explain how and why this happens, and then how to reduce the ambient pressure, so how to come back up to the surface safely so we don't have to stay at increased pressure forever, because we can't. Okay, so there's two kinds of decompression models. You have deterministic models, which are based off of theory alone, and then probabilistic models, which is based off of a set of man-studied data, mostly from the 1930s, 1960s US Navy dive tables, which is absurd what they did there. Okay, so decophysiology. One of the main things that we have to understand is inert gas equilibrium and what that means for us as divers. Inert gases exist in a gaseous state and in a dissolved state in an equilibrium that's dependent on pressure, ambient pressure, vapor pressure, and temperature. So, under different dive profiles, gas equilibrium shifts slightly. So colder dive, physiologically colder, pressure, the vapor pressure of liquids decrease, or gases decrease, meaning that the dive tables are more conservative, safer, whereas on hotter dives or physiologically hotter temperatures, they're a little less conservative.
Is that due to density?
due to vapor pressure, so it's a function of density and molality of gases. On-gassing, absorption, dissolved gas distribution. So once gases are being absorbed into tissues, they need to be distributed to other tissue compartments, which is a lot what Bjorman did in the CHL and Bjorman algorithms. It's basically dividing up tissues into, tissues into different compartments based off of the amount of gas that they absorb and off gas, or the rate of absorption and off gassing of different gases. And it's governed by two mechanisms: diffusion, which is passive, and then perfusion, which is dissolved gases moved into that area or tissue compartment by blood and then diffused out blood into tissue. Then off-gassing and out-gassing, which is the inverse function of dissolved gas distribution and on-gassing. So tissues off-gas at different rates and out-gas at different rates, just like they on-gas at different rates, which is something not taken into account by probabilistic modeling. Okay, DCS is the result of dissolved gases emerging from tissue in solution during decompression, which is influenced by a bunch of individual factors such as cardiac health, overall health, body composition, muscle composition. So the US Navy dive tables are extremely biased to younger, extremely fit men, which is not most divers. That's why there's...
What are you saying, buddy?
Talk about that later.
Do you feel seen?
Okay, anywho. So, DCS is the direct result of bubble formation. Bubbles form when we go up. It's just going to happen unless we keep pressure. Bubbles are bad, in general, unless you're a non-supersaturation model. Many big bubbles is not really good. Okay, so models of decompression, now that we covered the physiology and kind of what's going on. So deterministic models of decompression are going to be your Hayden and Hadelin derived models and your dual phase models, which are the majority of the algorithms our dive computers use. Probabilistic models are mainly what dive tables are derived from, which is all going back to human studies. So probabilistic, a bunch of dive data was collected, mainly by the US Navy, by seeing how long and how deep divers could go before they got bent, and pulling them back up, and seeing how fast we could pull them back up, and plotting it and creating a function, which is concerning. I have no idea how any review board approved that.
Government work.
Yes, we don't have that issue. Deterministic models are purely mathematical, trying to create a function that represents how we on-gas and off-gas during decompression and compression.
But Haldane as well, he didn't use Navy divers, but he did use goats.
Yes.
When he was doing all his experiments. He compressed goats and decompressed goats and see what happened to their tissues.
I remember.
Okay, so going more into deterministic models. So it's a mathematical model of decompression physiology, and most assume that supersaturation is unsafe, which is where we are overloading the tissue with a gas, and when we reduce ambient pressure, more bubbles are going to form. Deterministic models largely lack objective evaluation, since it is a mathematical model of something we are observing, and it's observed, and over the last 50, 60, whatever years, I guess it's now more like 80 since the 1940s, original models have been revised by experimental data collected through either meta-analysis, which is retrospective analysis of dive accidents, or by comparing it to the US Navy dive table set and better modeling. So within deterministic models, there is the critical supersaturation approach, which is the group of dive or deco algorithms that allow an acceptable limit of bubbles, that the premise is some bubbles are safe, but over a certain threshold is when we start to see symptomatic DCS. And they are limited by, shouldn't say limited by, they're governed by a gradient factor, which is basically a margin of safety. You don't have a pointer. Okay, so the M factor or gradient factor is this margin of safety off of the M line, which is determined experimentally, mainly off of the US Navy dive tables or dive program. And the gradient factor can be set closer or farther away from the M line to have a larger, smaller margin of safety. For us, recreationally, larger is probably better since we're not all young, fit men. And the other camp is no supersaturation, which their goal is to prevent bubble formation overall. This is going to be like your VGM and standard algorithms. Overall, it leads to a lower ascent or slower ascent rate because we can have a less difference in partial pressure between ambient and cell.
So this, I'm looking at this, and this is based off of also the deep stops.
Yes.
Well, they don't do. It's not just deep stops. Deep stops was something that the bubble theory
Yes.
promoted, and now it's gone out of sync. So it's not quite so popular anymore because they don't think some of the science it was based on was true.
Correct.
So the M line, basically, it was originally set as 2. 2.0 is normally what they use for the M line. So it's twice what ambient is as you come up. So your gradient factor there, when you got GF30, it means you don't want to get to within 30% of the M value going over.
Okay.
You come at the 80, you get your 80% of that 2.0, because if you stay at 30, it's going to take you 5 hours to get to the surface to actually come up within. So each of the stair steps, what you're trying to do is actually not do deep stops. You're trying to come up slowly till you hit whatever your 30% of the M line is or whatever. And if you have to stop there, stop there. But if you do it right, you'll actually be decompressing on the way up, so you can just stay within that stair step.
It's a rolling decompression.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
why we've all done a deco dive, going past 30 feet. However, we're not doing formal decompression stops because by the time we hit next increment, we're already off gas by the mountain.
Yeah.
Because when they say, like when Paddy and Nowie and everybody else says no deco dive, they're talking about a dive where if you came from that depth to the surface at 30 feet per second, 30 feet per minute rather, you would extend the limits and you'd be in decompression.
Yeah.
None of us come up that far, so even though like your computer's saying you're in NDL, it's only talking about if you went straight to the surface, straight up.
Correct.
So
That's
as
what
long
we're-
as you understand the math and you understand the physics and what you do, if your computer goes, say you get 4 or 5 minutes into NDL, past NDL, you'll clear it if you just come up gently and stop at the bus, feed some fish, stop at the trees, on the way up, you'll clear the decompression obligation.
Okay.
And the deeper your first, not necessarily the deeper your first stop is because it's governed by an exponential pressure, the less time you would have to spend compared to going up. Okay, so I'm just trying to say we are.
It's all the ratios, isn't it,
Yeah.
Jackson?
Yeah.
It's because it's a logarithmic function, which is what makes the math horrible, is because it's the relative pressure difference between the two. That's why there's such a big difference between 15 foot and the surface, because although it's only 1.5 atmospheres, it's a 50% pressure drop, because it's all logarithmic. Yeah.
But it's true that our organs don't really start decompressing until around, I think around 40 feet or so.
No, they decompress all the way up. As soon as you get a pressure gradient, so the pressure in your body is higher than the pressure outside of the pressure of the air that you're breathing or the nitrox that you're breathing, your organs will start to off gas. You'll start to off gas. Now, if the pressure gradient's only tiny, so if you've gone from 100 feet to 60 feet, so that's 4 atmospheres down to 3 atmospheres, so you've only got a 25% pressure gradient difference, so they're going to come out slower, but that's not a bad idea. I mean, once you get to 40 or 50, it just depends on how much air you've got left to stay at that
level to decompress. Because
Once your tissues are saturated, once all of your tissues are saturated, such as saturation diving, your decompression interval is going to be insane, like weeks. whereas
Correct.
like
That's where you know people in bells and they dive and they're
Habitats.
decompression. Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't realise though is once you're saturated, you can't get any worse. They kept feeding you air. You could stay down there forever.
it's all relative.
As long as you got air.
Yeah, air's a limiting factor.
The problem is you can need a lot more air to get back up.
Yes.
It can take a lot of time, 3 or 4 hours to get back up when you do the deep stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
So probabilistic models, these are a lot less glamorous, and I could go into the math. However, it's a huge data set, and I'm not a statistician. So probabilistic models calculate the risk of mild or CNS DCS on a given dive. Back in the 1930s, the U.S. Navy decided that a 2% incidence of mild DCS is an acceptable amount. Meaning, if you have 100 people, throw them all in, make them do the same dive, it's acceptable if 2 of them have mild DCS. What's the definition of mild? They've never stated. It's just not central nervous system or CNS DCS, so it does not involve the central nervous system, so you're not seeing seizures, blacking out, stuff like that. Might just be skin bends or joint bends or
Sore joints,
acceptable.
freckles, you know.
Who needs that?
Itching. Yeah.
The interesting thing, one of the very interesting parts of this one is, this is what our dive tables are based on. So,
Yeah.
there we go. This is NAUI, PADI, and all the other agencies based on that dive tables and the data that they used to drive this off of the Navy's dive tables and just added in a greater margin of safety. So, for NAUI's purposes, they did a factor of safety of 10, or reduced it to a case incidence of 0.2%, which is still not great considering.
And they've got more and more conservative. If you compare the 22 tables to the
Yeah,
19 tables to the 16 tables, because when I started, when I started 20 years ago, we didn't have computers, so we were diving off the tables.
Yeah.
So that's what we were doing, and they were more aggressive than they are now.
Yeah.
Because now they just think you've got a computer.
I still have my dive table when I first got certified, and I compare them, like, wow,
Yes.
they got more conservative.
Yeah.
It's increased like 10%. You know, so yeah.
This is the 3rd revision of the dive table. It's not even the 2nd.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful now with some of the. I was doing going through some of the mock exams, and I was getting the wrong answers, and I was going, what? And I was checking, oh yeah, because I'm using the 2019 tables, and the latest open water used the 2022 tables. Yeah.
Which, one of the reasons for making it more conservative is not just liability or that we have computers. Dan's been doing a longitudinal study and found that they're at Gilboa last year.
Yeah, I saw that.
They're currently recruiting people specifically women divers in Florida.
In Florida.
Specifically women
Yes.
divers,
Women.
yes.
Because it was based on young, fit men.
Steph wanted to do that.
And women in scuba are underrepresented groups, so there's a smaller sample size that have been collected through other dive incidents, so now we need to collect more data to validate off of, which gets into the next part.
Different tissue types.
Model validation. There's one article published on PubMed, which is the database of health and scientific biomedical literature, that looked at model validation for scuba. Yeah, one in the last however many years.
Oh my god.
Yes.
There's been lots of research on the guys that do deep stuff and do proper deco dives and mixed gases and stuff like that. So I think he's New Zealand or Australian. He's got quite a lot of videos, and he's a professor at one of the universities down there. But they don't do stuff for regular divers. It's all for the crazy guys going down to 400 or 500 feet, not the open water divers.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Why that area is more incentivized than other areas of like recreational diving when we don't have extreme pressure gradients?
Because that's what they like doing. But yeah.
It's financially incentivized.
Yeah, I was going to say it's money.
Yeah.
It's money.
It's always money.
Industrial diving and also space programs.
Oh yes, yeah.
And DCS is a concern for them because we're going from a pressurized vehicle, vessel, habitat, whatever they call it, to the actual vehicular walks.
Spacewalks, yeah.
Yeah, spacewalks. It's a comparable pressure difference to us diving down to extreme depths, like over 200 meters.
Yeah, they have very, very low oxygen concentration in the spacesuits that they've got. Yeah.
So this study, the only study, looked at 4 different algorithms, which is also concerning. However, these are 4 very, very common algorithms. So you have your pseudo reduced gradient bubble model, your Bjorman-based DHL-16C, which is our 16 component one, and then 2 other, your one other less common dual phase, and EMC-1620, which is a more divided version of this DHL-16C. It's the same core component, just divided up with 16 tissues. It's a little bit more conservative since, well, sorry, 20 compartments instead of 16.
Right.
It's a little bit more conservative because it's saying it takes longer to diffuse from the 4 ladder compartments than the 16 other ones.
Yeah, as you say, they've got linear for their off-gassing. So rather than doing the exponential, they think they're coming up, like you said, coming up fast makes you off-gas faster. So the exponential models say that.
Okay.
The linear models say no.
No, that's, yeah.
So this is a direct excerpt from the old 1946 U.S. Navy experiments that gave us the U.S. Navy dive tables. And probabilistically, if you're below the solid line, you have a 0.2% chance of CNS DCS, or roughly a 2% chance or incidence rate of mild DCS symptoms. So if you're below that, congratulations, you're fine. This is from 120 feet. Closed circles are, closed circles, hollow, not sure what you want to call it, are instances of no DCS. Dash circles are mild DCS. Solid circles are CNS involvement in DCS, which that's quite a widespread. I'd be interested to see the margin of error of sampled data, since you have a lot of outliers. So it's not a great data set to make probabilistic models or deterministic models, but this is what we have, so this is what we're using.
So I can't remember how quickly they brought them up. I'm trying to remember. I'd have to go and reread it.
They had several different
Yeah,
rates.
same rates, yeah. Because it was a lot. It was more aggressive back then than we used now.
It was
yeah.
60. What is it?
60 feet a minute, was
60
it?
feet, 75 feet, and then 90, 95.
Something really
It's
fast,
so
yeah.
crazy.
That's so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get such a widespread. Then when they compiled the data, they did not separate it out in different plots based off of descent rate. They assumed that all tissues off-gas at the same rate, so why should descent rate matter?
Yeah, because obviously back then they're doing the experiment, especially in the 30s, because they didn't know. So it wasn't like, oh, I've got dive tables and I'm exceeding them to mess around. It's like, I have no idea, so let's come up slow, let's come up fast, and let's see what happens.
Look like a rocket?
No,
we
you're
got
fine.
problems.
Did they give sample sizes at all?
And the sample size per cohort, so per group or dive profile, range between 1 and 6.
Oh my gosh.
So extremely small sample
That's
sizes.
crazy.
Like,
The top one has like what, 2 or 3 up there?
there's 4.
4.
That's
4,
insane.
you have like 2.
Yeah,
Down
but
here.
still, like 4. That is your sample size.
Good enough.
Bye.
And this was, I think it was also as well, I mean, they got down to 250 feet. This was probably all on air.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's all air
Nitrox,
diving. Yeah.
Elox, other exotic
No
mixtures,
talking mixed
one
gases
No.
or anything like that. So
And the more modern data sets of in-water dives are all retrospective. Of people who had any
DCS.
DCS.
Yeah.
Because no ethical review boards approving it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, obviously.
you can't be like, you know what, we need 100 people to do this. They're gonna be like, no.
That's why we were talking about they want women for the studies. In America, no dive organization in America will recommend somebody who's pregnant diving. The rest of the world, most of the countries, the rest of the world saying go for it.
Yep.
But for that same reason, nobody can do empirical studies Because who's going to get a bunch of
Pregnant
ladies
women.
to,
Hey.
to volunteer to try and go to DCS? Yeah.
Send a pregnant goat down there. I don't know.
We're currently using hamsters in Sweden. It's sponsored by, I say, Chevron. Some oil company sponsoring it, and they're using pregnant hamsters.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You can see the fuel companies do it because that's where all their deep divers are doing, and bells and everything
Well,
else.
and also, we don't even know, even with the kids.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever done anything on the kids. That's why they don't recommend the kids to go below 60.
60.
Because we don't know what it does on developing tissues and stuff like that. Yeah.
Probably nothing, but we don't have
Exactly what
evidence
we
to
don't
support
know.
They might off gas faster than anything. Nobody knows.
Well, they're
it. Well,
dense.
they have better perfusion, so
Correct.
They
yeah.
do, but they also have less dense cell makeup, right? Yeah. So their bone structure, their muscle tissues, all of that is a lot more fluid. You know, so they'd be more likely to absorb.
Now the funny thing to think about, all these dive tables that they had back in that time, that's how Van dove, that's how...
So I started
all-
diving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That explains a lot.
And who knows?
Did you have color TV?
When I was a kid, my first TV was a 12-inch black and white TV in my bedroom. We had one color 20-inch TV in the house, okay, with 3 channels.
3
Three channels.
The 4th one came along in 1981.
It was a grand year.
called imaginatively Channel 4.
You had what, 53?
Sorry?
53 was one of the channels?
Well, it was in England, so it was UHF, not VHF, so it wasn't.
Well,
it wasn't on the-
53 is what I was thinking.
Yeah, it wasn't on the. It wasn't on the clicker.
okay. So the authors of this paper took about 4 computers running about 4 different algorithms and placed them in a hyperbaric chamber to pressurize it to simulate dive profiles. So the 0.2% CNS DCS isoclass, which is black line here, is your red line there, which is interesting that certain algorithms have a higher likelihood of going over that acceptable incidence rate of DCS, while others are grossly more conservative overall. However, they diverge at the extrema, so shallow dives and deep dives kind of fall off of the representation of the algorithm, which highlight another issue with data. We have a lot of data for shallow, not a lot of data, but there's more data representing shallow dives and more data representing very deep dives with nothing in the middle of more common recreational depths, like 40 to 50 feet. This is a graph comparing time using a 3% isopath of the total incidence of DCS, so basically 3% chance of getting DCS if you're over the red line, so above it versus below it, comparing the different algorithms. There's one outlier that's really hard to see since they use red on red, but Snudo's reduced gradient bubble model, which is a critical supersaturation model, saying that some bubbles are okay, not all. But just the little ones are fine. It's almost directly over the 3% DCS isopath line, going up from 30 feet, which is greatly above all the other ones, including the EMC 20H, which is the other supercritical saturation one that's common on product. Shearwater uses it, or has the ability to use it, so does Snudo, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not defaulted in Shearwater, but they're available.
Well, all the other deterministic ones are well below it and more linear than exponential, which shows a little bit of math behind it. And if we compare it to the 150-foot dive profiles, they're a little bit beyond recreational depth, but still relevant if we overshoot or are less cardiovascular fit in general. Snudo's reduced gradient model, again, directly in line with it until you get to the extrema above 150-ish feet, which is over at this end. All the other ones, again, are relatively grouped well below it. So, directly comparing the algorithms, none of the algorithms had an incidence rate below 2% based off of factory settings.
Wow.
Yeah. even shear waters, 35, 80, what is it, 35, 85, 30, 85 GF failed. Which is greater than what the US Navy dive tables had originally for young fit men. Asterisk there. However, most of the off-the-shelf commercially available dive computers were able to be configured in a way to get below a 3% instance of DCS by messing with either the GF or conservation factor for Snudo's reduced bubble model or the EMC 20H model. Which is concerning because we're all using computers and most of us probably are not adjusting the default gradient factors or conservation factors off of the M line.
Well, it's also one of the very good reasons why it's always, because all these are direct to surface ascents. This isn't using the 3-minute stop at 15. So that's why we always say the longer you can stay in that 15 to 20 feet, it makes a massive difference in the math. Just to stay at that level before you've got that last 50% difference in the air pressure to let you off gas some more. And I'd have to dig up the math. It's kind of interesting that there's a certain way you can decompress on the way up that reduces your overall time, but you end up spending more time at that 15 foot than 3 minutes. You have to spend 5 or 6 minutes there, but you can get there faster. But your overall time to get to the bottom to the top is actually less.
That's what I was trying to get before, and it's like,
I should have put this back on the last slide because it illustrates what the safety margin is and what stepwise going up to the M, you can sawtooth your way up to your 15-foot stop, 20 to 15 feet stop to off gas. However, your gradient factor is going to teeter-totter all the way up to safety stop, where you're going to begin in and out of states of off-gassing at a faster rate than a linear ascent would be. However, if you're low on gas, press the gas, whatever, that's better than slowly going up and just setting 3 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of makes me know. I think they were setting like the gradient factors to 99 for the low, so it got them up fast and down like 65 or 70 for the high, so that it was lower than the 40-80 for the top, but they were doing 99 up, so it wasn't making them stay deep, so they were coming up bouncing right off the M line.
That's all I have.
Nice.
Good job.
Excellent. Thank you. Absolutely.